The drive to Denny's gave me time to think. Maybe too much time. Every scenario my mind conjured was worse than the last. Drug smuggling, organ harvesting, human trafficking. None of them quite fit what I suspected I saw, or at least thought I saw. Based on the hints and unnerving glimpses, I really did not know anything for sure about what was really going on at PT Shipping. Yet anything seemed plausible. Jean was already there when I arrived, tucked into a booth in the far corner, nursing a cup of coffee. She changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a faded sweatshirt, but the severe bun remained, pulling her features taut.
"You came,"
she said as I slid into the seat across from her.
"Wasn't sure you would."
Of course. What was it you wanted to tell me? I was sort of hoping that it might be a bit more about what the hell we were moving in that place, I replied, keeping my voice low despite the nearly empty restaurant. What I heard last night, what I saw.
"You didn't see anything,"
Jean interrupted, her eyes hard.
"That's the first thing you need to understand. If you're going to survive this job, you need to accept that some things cannot be explained. Or rather, should not be explained."
A waitress approached, but Jean waved her away with a practiced gesture. The woman retreated without a word, as if she recognized something in Jean that warned against interruption. I can't just pretend I didn't hear anything. I mean, come on, are we even safe? I asked, leaning forward. Something is wrong with those containers. Something was buzzing, maybe even scratching inside them. Then there were the screams during that so-called maintenance period. Jean's hands shot across the table, gripping my wrist with painful intensity. Her fingernails dug into my skin as she pulled me closer.
"Lower your voice,"
she hissed. Her eyes, I noticed for the first time, weren't just tired. They held a kind of haunted knowledge that made me falter.
"Yes, there were sounds. Yes, there were things in those containers that probably don't fit into your neat little understanding of the world. But knowing more won't help you. It will only make things worse. And no, strictly speaking, we are not what you would probably call safe. But the only way to guarantee you are not safe is to keep openly asking questions." She released my wrist, leaving small crescent marks where her nails had been. I rubbed the spot, watching as she took another sip of her coffee, her hands trembling slightly. I can't keep working there. Whatever's happening, it's messed up. At this point, the whole thing seems like it's a front for something massively illegal. I don't know how much you aren't telling me. Maybe we could go to the police. With everything we suspect, someone would have to investigate. A harsh, bitter laugh escaped Jean's lips, drawing glances from the few other early morning patrons. She leaned back in the booth, suddenly looking almost defeated. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The police, they already know, or at least certain people in the department do. Why do you think we operate so openly? Why do we have business licenses and tax ID numbers? This isn't some fly-by-night operation. PT has connections." "What kind of connections could possibly allow them to—" "Powerful ones," Jean cut me off. "Look, I've seen people like you before. Decent, moral people who think they can change things. Who think they can expose what's happening and make it stop." She leaned forward again, her eyes locking with mine. "Remember Jacob, the guy who had your job before you?" I shook my head. "Exactly. No one remembers Jacob. He decided to be a hero too. Took photos on his phone of one of the containers. Tried to open one when no one was looking." Her voice caught slightly. 2 days later, his apartment was empty. All his things were gone. Like he never existed. His mother filed a missing persons report. Nothing came of it.
A cold weight settled in my stomach.
You're saying they killed him?
Jean's eyes darted around the restaurant before returning to mine.
I'm saying he disappeared. Just like Marissa before him, and David before her. People who ask too many questions don't last long at PT.
I swallowed hard and considered her words. It was too much at that point, and I just resolved to get out. I told Jean my plan. Okay then, I will just quit. I don't like it, but if something dangerous or illegal is going on that could just disappear me, then I will just leave. I can even put in a 2 weeks notice, so they don't think it is because I suspect something. Jean laughed, a harsh and hollow sound. She looked at me like I was an unruly child.
You think that they believe anyone could be so dense as to not suspect something? Even after one night?
So then what can I do? Why are you telling me this? Her eyes narrowed and she responded.
Because you need to know that you can't just quit now. You are in this whether you like it or not. If you want to not disappear too, then just keep your head down, keep quiet, and do not rock the boat. The less you know, the less danger you're in. I have to go.
You should get some sleep and remember what I told you. I am off tomorrow.
Try and keep safe while I'm gone, and take care.
She threw some money on the table and walked out without another word, and I was left stunned and speechless. It sounded like I was stuck and I still had no idea what I had gotten myself into. My anxiety was palpable, and I hardly got any sleep when I returned home. If what Jean said was true, then the place I had just gotten a job at was hiding a dark secret and I could not uncover it or leave and run away. I was forced, for the time being, to continue working for the bizarre company. Continue shifting those mysterious boxes without ever knowing what horrors they might contain. When it was time to go back, I hesitated and almost considered calling out and not going. But I didn't want to attract any unwanted attention just then. So I summoned my courage and went back to PT shipping for my second day of work. I arrived a few minutes early, but no one else was there to greet me this time. I shuffled in and grabbed a new manifest from my workstation and the tablet. I saw the first shipment was scheduled to arrive in the next 10 minutes. Then I looked at the list, continue on into another page, and realized that there were twice the amount of trucks that day than my first, and I had no apparent help. At least with what I would be doing. I thought briefly about the other people I saw leave the building yesterday at 5 a.m. Why did they have us sectioned off and not working together? It was another question I would have to set aside. I was going to be very busy and thought that maybe the distraction might be nice. The first truck backed up to the loading dock with a low rumble that vibrated through the concrete floor. I approached, cautiously, remembering Jean's methodical movements from the night before. The keypad by the door blinked expectantly. I punched in the code I'd memorized and stepped back as the doors swung open. Unlike last night's mysterious black containers, this truck held rows of ordinary-looking wooden crates. They were stacked neatly, secured with straps, each bearing standard shipping labels and barcodes. No strange temperatures, no odd buzzing, just regular freight. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Maybe not every shipment contained whatever horrors Jean had alluded to. Maybe some days were just normal. The manifest indicated these were textile supplies for various retail locations across the 3 states. Fabric bolts, perhaps, sewing machines, things a company called the Proud Tailor might legitimately ship. I worked efficiently, scanning each crate and moving it to its designated staging area. The forklift hummed beneath me, comfortingly mundane. For nearly an hour, I allowed myself to believe I was simply working a regular warehouse job, one that happened to pay extraordinarily well for night shifts. I thought I might be able to relax for a moment, but I heard the staticky voice of Matt through the intercom.
New guy. Second shipment is ahead of schedule. It is a priority shipment. Get down to receiving Bay B. Get a move on.
I was not even done with the first load, and now the next one was already coming. I was starting to get stressed out that I was falling behind. I rushed to Bay B, maneuvering the forklift hastily through the narrow aisles. As I rounded the final corner, I caught sight of the back of a sleek, black truck, similar to the first one I'd seen last night. My heart immediately began to race, knowing what might be inside. Just as I approached the loading dock, the forklift sputtered, the engine making a high-pitched whining sound I hadn't heard before. The control panel flickered, lights blinking erratically across the dashboard. I tried to slow down, but the machine lurched forward suddenly, as if pushed by an invisible hand. I yanked the steering wheel to the right, narrowly avoiding a stack of pallets. The forklift shuddered violently beneath me, the hydraulics screaming in protest. Then, without warning, the lift dropped, not smoothly as designed, but in a single catastrophic release. They slammed into the concrete floor with a deafening crash, sparks flying as metal scraped against concrete. I was thrown forward against the safety cage, my chest hitting the steering column hard enough to knock the wind out from my lungs. The forklift continued its chaotic movement, spinning in a half circle before the engine cut out completely, leaving me stranded in the middle of the bay.
What the hell are you doing?
Matt's voice boomed from somewhere behind me. I turned to see him storming across the warehouse floor, his face contorted with rage.
I didn't. The forklift just...
I stammered, still trying to catch my breath. Matt reached me in seconds, his weathered face inches from mine.
Get off. Now.
I scrambled down from the malfunctioning vehicle, my legs shaking. Matt circled the forklift, examining it with narrowed eyes. He ran his hand along the control panel, then knelt to inspect the dropped forks.
This equipment was checked yesterday,
he muttered, more to himself than to me. Then his gaze snapped back to my face, eyes cold and calculating.
Goddamn interference is worse than normal. Were you near any red-tagged containers earlier?
No, I answered truthfully. I've been unloading the one marked textile shipment so far. Matt's jaw tightened as he glanced toward the black truck waiting at the bay.
Well, the timing of this is awful.
He pulled a radio from his belt.
Gene, we need you at Bay B. Equipment failure.
There was no response, just static.
Right. She's off today.
The back doors of the black truck swung open on their own, revealing the now familiar darkness that seemed deeper than it should be. A soft, rhythmic thumping sound emerged from within, like something repeatedly striking the interior wall. Matt cursed under his breath.
Those need to be moved immediately. Temperature sensitive.
He turned to me.
You'll have to move them manually.
Manually? I echoed, my voice cracking. You mean carry them?
The dollies are in the maintenance closet,
Matt growled, pointing toward a narrow door across the warehouse.
Grab one. Quick.
I jogged to the closet, my mind racing. Manual handling meant direct contact with whatever those black containers held. The thought made my skin crawl, but I had little choice. Matt was watching my every move with increasing impatience. Inside the closet, I found several heavy-duty dollies designed for oversized freight. I selected the sturdiest-looking one and wheeled it back to the bay where Matt stood, arms crossed, foot tapping rhythmically against the concrete.
Remember the protocol,
he said as I approached the truck.
No unnecessary contact. Move them directly to the designated area.
He glanced at his watch.
I need to make a call. Get this done before I return.
As Matt disappeared through a side door, I faced the yawning darkness of the truck's interior alone. The thumping had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that somehow felt worse. I steeled myself and rolled the dolly up the loading ramp. The first container slid forward, as if pushed by unseen hands. just like the night before. Up close, without Jean's calming presence, the experience was infinitely more unsettling. The black surface seemed to absorb the light around it, and as I positioned the dolly beneath one end, I could have sworn the container shifted slightly, adjusting on its own to maintain balance. I carefully tipped the container back, distributing its considerable weight across the dolly's frame. It was heavier than I expected, at least 300 pounds. As I began to pull it down the ramp, a vibration traveled up through the handles into my arms, a subtle, rhythmic tremor-like heartbeat. The container slid off the truck with surprising ease, almost eager to be free of its confined space. I guided it across the warehouse floor toward the staging area Matt had indicated. With each step, the vibration grew more pronounced. When I reached the staging area, I carefully lowered the container to the ground. As it settled onto the concrete, a sound emerged from within, a kind of soft scraping, like fingernails dragging across the interior surface. I jumped back, nearly losing my grip on the dolly. The digital display on the container flickered, the temperature reading jumping from -10 degrees Celsius to -8, then back again. The scraping sound intensified for a moment, then abruptly stopped. I stood frozen, staring at the black box. Whatever it was sounded like it was moving, scraping. The realization sent ice through my veins, but I couldn't afford to panic. There were still 2 more containers to move, and Matt would return soon. Forcing myself back to the truck, I repeated the process with the second container. This one was even heavier, and as I maneuvered it down the ramp, a thin sheen of condensation formed on its surface, immediately turning to frost in the warehouse air. The temperature display read -15 degrees Celsius, colder than the first. As I positioned it next to the other container, both boxes seemed to shudder simultaneously, as if acknowledging each other's presence. The hair on my arms stood on end, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not by security cameras or by Matt, but by whatever was sealed inside these mysterious shipments. I returned for the third and final container, my nerves fraying with each step. This one looked different from the others, slightly larger, with a faint red glow emanating from its temperature display. As I approached, a wave of dizziness washed over me, accompanied by a high-pitched ringing in my ears. The container slid forward, but unlike the others, it moved aggressively, nearly crushing me against the side of the truck. I stumbled backward, barely catching myself on the loading dock edge.
Careful,
Matt said as he walked up behind me. He looked over my shoulder and saw the red glint of the item. Not sure why this one was not red tagged on the list. Step out, please. I am taking this to the secure storage room. I need you to move all the other boxes to cold storage and hurry. I don't have anyone else to spare for help at the moment, so just go as fast as you can. I nodded quickly and stepped aside, watching as Matt carefully maneuvered the red-labeled container onto a specialized cart. His movements were precise, almost reverent, as he secured it with straps I hadn't seen used on any other shipment. The container emitted a soft humming noise that made my teeth ache.
Don't fall behind,
Matt called over his shoulder as he wheeled the mysterious box away.
and remember, no unnecessary contact.
I returned to my task, moving the remaining containers to cold storage with mechanical efficiency. Each one seemed to react differently to being handled. One vibrated intensely when passing certain areas of the warehouse. Another grew noticeably heavier near the loading bay doors, as if reluctant to be stored away. I tried to focus solely on the physical labor, to shut down the part of my brain screaming that none of this was normal. The cold storage area was a maze of shelving units filled with identical black containers. The temperature was brutal, my breath clouding instantly in the frigid air. My fingers grew numb as I positioned each new arrival in its designated spot, guided only by the blinking scanner in my hand. I noticed that some of the older containers had frost patterns forming on their surfaces. Not random crystallization, but intricate, almost deliberate designs. Just as I finished securing the last container, the lights in the cold storage flickered. Once, twice, then plunged into darkness for a full 3 seconds before sputtering back to life. I stood there shivering and regretted not bringing a coat or something warm. Fortunately, I was finished. Back on the main floor, I discovered that 2 more trucks had arrived while I'd been occupied in the cold storage area. My heart sank at the sight of the endless freight waiting to be processed. Without the forklift, I'd have to move everything by hand. Matt was nowhere to be found, likely still dealing with that mysterious red-tagged container. I grabbed another dolly and set to work, my muscles already protesting from the strain of moving the first batch of containers. These new shipments weren't the black boxes, but were still unnervingly heavy crates of textile equipment, according to their manifests, though they weighed far more than any sewing machine I'd ever encountered. I tried to maintain a rhythm as I wheeled crate after crate to their designated areas. The warehouse seemed to stretch endlessly before me, distances expanding impossibly between loading dock and staging areas. My shirt clung to my back with sweat despite the building's chill. After I finished with the trucks, another arrived with dozens of smaller packages needing scanning and sorting. Fatigue made me clumsy, and I fumbled with the scanner, dropping it twice and cracking the casing on the second fall. The clock on the wall read 2:17 a.m. I'd been working non-stop for hours, yet had barely made a dent in the night's shipments. The manifest on my tablet showed 3 more trucks scheduled before dawn. I felt a spike of panic rise in my chest. There was simply no way I could finish all this alone. I worked non-stop, skipping whatever time I would have taken for a break. I was tired, hungry, and exhausted, and no one else was around to help. I lost track of time, and to my horror, I heard the 5 a.m. alarm go off. I dropped a box I was carrying and it crashed to the floor. I was scared to look down at it, but when I did, I saw the box had not been opened. I bolted to the exit just in time, feeling the adrenaline surging through my veins as I burst out, immediately catching the anxious stares of a few coworkers from the other sections of the warehouse. Their eyes were wide with concern, clearly worried about the chaos erupting behind me. As I hurried further away, I desperately tried to block out the ominous noises that began to echo, a sinister sound building in the distance. Suddenly, a whisper sliced through the tension, urgently vying for my attention.
Hey, you! Did you see Mike? From Section 4? He was supposed to be right behind me.
I shook my head and watched as the blood drained from the man's face. I was about to offer some reassurance when the air was pierced by an intensifying buzzing and screeching sound, a cacophony that made my skin crawl. The others turned away, unwilling to face the impending horror. But the man who had questioned me stood frozen, fear etched on his features. The terrifying sounds from yesterday crescendoed once more, each note now carrying the unmistakable clarity of a person's voice. A desperate cry for help. A scream tore through the air, sharp and chilling, and then everything plunged into an eerie, suffocating silence. I turned away, closing my eyes, and tried to steady my thoughts as I waited. Eventually, someone announced we had just 1 minute before maintenance time ended. We lined up to return to our stations, and I caught sight of the man who had asked about his coworker, shuffling despondently behind me. His face was a mask of hopelessness and despair. We all had a sense that something terrible had happened to his friend, but no one knew what, and no one dared to voice it. I returned to my station, so far behind in my remaining work that I felt hopeless. I toiled on mechanically, my mind a tumult of uncertainty and dread. My shift came and went, stretching nearly to 12 hours, finally ending after 9 a.m. Despite the exhaustion, I couldn't shake the feeling of disbelief over my circumstances. I staggered back to my car and drove home. My second day was over, and I found myself wishing I could just ignore the reality of my situation. I went to sleep and tried to forget it all for the small portion of the day I had left, before I had to go back for my third day.